Kansas State gets their first Big 12 win of the season against Utah, but let's be real, there's still a ton of work to do.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Now part of number one sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's dive into today's episode as Kansas State wins last night, the first time in Big 12 play this season under Jerome Tang. 1 in 6 tries. That's not good enough, but it's still in the right direction. They moved to 1 in 5 in Big 12 play after taking down the Utah Utes in a little scary fashion, 81-78. We're going to dig into that game. We're going to talk about what Jerome Tang had to say, and then we're going to look forward because this weekend they play Kansas in Manhattan. That's a huge game, and it can really change the entire landscape of what has happened to begin Big 12 play. It truly can. I'm going to explain to you why all in this episode. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bringing you Kansas State coverage like nobody else right here on Locked On Kansas State. 81-78 was this final. And in a nutshell, this is what I have to say for this game. PJ Haggerty was amazing. He took off with this game. He carried the entire team on his back. There were some injuries we're going to get to on this episode. They only played 7 players. PJ Haggerty had his best game as a Kansas State Wildcat. Now, it wasn't his highest scoring game. That was against Mississippi State, where he scored 37. But he scored 34 points. He shot almost 30 times. He had 8 rebounds, 4 assists. He was fantastic. He only turned the ball over 3 times. He was fantastic. At the end of the game, there was some foul trouble on the other side of the ball for Terrence Brown, the star for Utah. They made good coaching decisions. Matthew Driscoll and Jerome Tang on the offensive side made PJ Haggerty expose that, and it completely changed the way that the end of this game happened for Kansas State. Now, here's the downside. Get it out of the way right off the bat. They only beat Utah, the team that is expected to be in the bottom of the Big 12 conference, by 3 points. And there was moments where Utah, rubber band theory, whatever you want to play, was in charge of this game. There were moments that Utah was in charge of this game. This Kansas State team should have not been remotely close to Utah based on expectations earlier this season. Now, again, there were injuries. They had to overcome them. They got it done. They got the win, and that's all that matters. But let's not act like just because they got a win here, that the last 5 games didn't happen, that this season is still very disappointing so far, and there's still a lot of work to be done if they want to make sure they get to the NCAA tournament, something that is still technically on the table, but man, is there a lot of work to be done. We're seeing certain things pop into the bubble when it comes to the women's side. The Kansas State women's basketball team just found themselves on the bubble after their upset win against Texas Tech. Big games, big wins, especially in the toughest conference in basketball, the Big 12. You find a way to steal one of those, and all of a sudden your resume looks a heck of a lot better. A game with Kansas on Saturday could definitely change that as well. We'll get to that on this show as well. PJ Haggerty, as I mentioned, 34 points. He was absolutely incredible. He deserves all the flowers. He's showing that he's an All-American. All of that stuff. You got to love it. David Castillo stepped up. We're going to get to the injury news in just a minute, but Abdi Bashir has been out with an injury. He's going to be out for quite some time. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But David Castillo stepped up in his absence. Started this game instead of coming off the bench, played 33 minutes, 20 points, 7 for 12 from the field, 6 for 9 from 3 points. And that was incredible. Kansas State only shot 23 3-point attempts in this game, the same as Utah. Wasn't the 40 mark that Jerome Tang talked about in the past. Only picked 12 for 23, but they were 52% from the 3-point land. You almost kind of wish they shot a little more because it was working for them. But overall, they shot very good. This is an offense that shot very good in this one, but still gave up 78 points on the defensive side to the Utah Utes, one of the worst teams in the Big 12 Conference. And for the record, while we're sitting there right now, Kansas State is seen as one of the worst teams in the Big 12 Conference. Taj Manning, I thought he played electric. Don't look at how many points he scored or how many times he shot. He only had 2 points, but I felt like he made some very good decisions out there on the defensive side. Probably one of my favorite defensive players in this entire game. He played 35 minutes in this game. Had to step up for other injuries, Kamari McGriff, Elias Rapiak. He was really the only guy, the only big guy that could play in this game, and he stepped up to the challenge. He played 35 minutes. Doreen Buka only played 13 minutes. Taj Manning stepped up in this basketball game. And it shows, and it makes you question that if they are healthy, if they can, what can they do? If Elias Rapiak is ready to go, if Kamari McGriff is ready to go for this weekend, and they play like they did against Utah on the offensive ways, offensively, defense always has to improve. It's had to improve all season long. We've talked about that even their greatest games. But if they play like this offensively, they have a chance. And I'm going to talk about that later on in this show. Taj Manning and David Castillo, they deserve the unsung hero awards for this game. No doubt about that. PJ Haggerty, obviously the MVP, but he couldn't have got it done without Castillo and Taj Manning stepping up. And it's great when it's those two players, because those aren't the portal players. Those aren't the ones that came over this year to rebuild this squad. Those are the ones that stuck through the offseason, that were here last year, that watched the buildup, that watched all the peaks and valleys of last year, all the drama of last year, all the tinkering, the buzzwords that Jerome Tang liked to use last year. They stuck around. They developed. They've built into better players that are getting prominent minutes on the roster and are actually showing up in that case. Taj Manning has really grown this year. I don't think there's another player on this roster that has took the jump from not seeing really anything to being a 35-minute player. Of course, when injuries happen, but a 35-minute player against Utah in Big 12 conference play. David Castillo has been electric as well. The fact that he hasn't started has just honestly been a good type of transition strategy, between him and Haggerty, or him and Nate Johnson or Bashir. The fact that he got the start today and got 33 minutes was just a testament to show that he's got it. He's impressive. And I'm very excited to see David Castillo when he shoots for three, because last year, remember, he was struggling with his shot. We all knew he had it. There was moments where we asked the question, is this a star in the making? And this year, we're really seeing that development take shape. 6 for 9 from three. This isn't the first time that we've seen Castillo go off. And it's awesome when he does it, when his team really needs him, when there's a lot of injuries taking place in this one. Another downside to this game, it almost happened again. Lost the game against Oklahoma State on Saturday with a terrible foul. You fouled a 3-point shot. Oklahoma State took the lead by 1. Kansas State wound up losing the game by 1. At the end of this game, there was a foul. It was almost a 3. It was a 2-point shot. You forced Utah to go to the line to shoot 2. Thankfully, they only made 1 of that shot, and it kept Kansas State in front and forced a tough shot, a buzzer beater shot by Terrence Brown, and he missed that one of the very few shots he missed in the fourth quarter to keep Kansas State in the lead to get their first Big 12 win of the season. It's still too close for comfort, in my opinion. Losing or winning only by 3 to Utah, but look, a win's a win. And I have said it week in and week out so far this season. I've said it last year as well, even when it was a quote-unquote down year for the Big 12. This is an absolute gauntlet of a conference. An absolute gauntlet. Utah is seen as one of the worst teams in the Big 12, and they are still doing this impressive type of play inside the Big 12. They're 9-10 now. Kansas State moves to 10-9. This was a very pivotal game for both teams. Utah was expected to be here. They're program building. Kansas State's on the flip side, where they're on, crap or get off the pot kind of mode. Utah is a really excellent team. And I think they're going to be very good in seasons to come. I think Terrence Brown is a very fun player to pay attention to. They showed a stat during the game that he is second all-time right now in program history for points per game for a Utah Ute. And some of the other players were like NBA greats, and like Gortat and Keith Van Horn. Terrence Brown was right in the middle of that stat line. So applaud Utah for keeping it close. And honestly, I think they're doing a lot better than a lot of people expected, although they're 1-5 Big 12 record. But Kansas State had to get this win. We talked about it on the show yesterday. It was a program-defining game. They would have lost this game. It would have been a completely different conversation this morning, talking about this show, talking about this program, talking about what the future was. And who knows, that conversation might still be down the line, and it might still be warranted. But right now, you live to fight another day. And we'll see what that means this coming weekend against Kansas, because that, of course, is a really interesting game as well. Let's talk what Jerome Tang had to say about this game, and, of course, the injuries and what that means for the future of this program, because they rely on some of these players so much, especially right away. And we're talking about that Kansas game on Saturday. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts. You can apply to them the bets you like the most. Obviously, the AFC NFC Championship game, you're going to ride with Jarrett Stidham. You're going to think that he can get the upset, be one of the backups to make it to the Super Bowl, or maybe a team like the Seattle Seahawks who just completely just dominated the 49ers. Will they do that again against the Rams? Your chance to do that, you can put it all together and add a little bit more juice to the bets you already like, instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make that bet feel that way too. You make the picks, then apply that profit boost and go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, and thanks for making this the first listen of your day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 podcast network in the world, and really appreciate that. If you want even more, consider joining the Everydayers Club. You can check that out by going to lockedonkansasstate.supercast.com or check out the show notes in the description below. We're diving into Kansas State getting the win against Utah 81-78, getting their first Big 12 win of the season. And Jerome Tang talked after the game, and I'm sure you weren't surprised that he immediately went and took a religious route at the beginning, talked about his faith in adversity. Nothing wrong with that, by the record. I want to put that very clear out there. But just not surprised. It's something he's done every single time, win or lose, when it comes to a presser. And he opened it up talking about really the injuries initially, saying about there was enough. He framed it saying that there was enough. They had enough players out there. There was nothing to worry about. They had adversity. We have enough. And really talked about the fact that there was multiple injuries in this game. They had a short pen. They had a short bullpen for this one. Only 7 players played for Kansas State, and that's because Abdi Bashir Jr. is now out with a stress fracture. He got surgery the same day. Jerome Tang's talked about saying if it was his son, he would have told him to get the surgery. And he wanted to play on it, but they pushed it to make sure he was getting it. And I think that's the right move. Obviously, if he's not 100%, he's a 3-point specialist. If he can't land properly, if defense is not that great, obviously, defense has struggled for the team in general. So if you're already saying that defense is going to get even worse because you're dealing with an injury, you just can't let that happen. So reportedly, according to Jerome Tang and according to the broadcast at the beginning of the game last night, Abdi Bashir will be out approximately 4 to 6 weeks. So what does that mean when you look at the actual schedule coming up? Well, that means that he might be back about the middle of February, which lines him up for the Texas Tech game. That is probably the closest that you would probably get him to return. I think that is like probably the highest expectation is on February 21st, a game on the road in Lubbock against a top 25 team in Texas Tech. And that would give him 5 games until the Big 12 tournament. I think that's very optimistic. I'm not expecting that to happen. But if you're putting the 4 to 6 week timeline in there, that lines up as the first game for him to return. If you're talking the 6 weeks, you're talking 6 weeks or later, you're talking him returning for the Big 12 tournament, or potentially after, or potentially not at all. Potentially he might not return to the season and be done. So this is a very drastic injury. This is a crucial injury for Kansas State. Remember, at Big 12 Media Days, Jerome Tang said that Abdi Bashir was the best shooter in the country. And of course, it hasn't always been that way this year. He's only averaging 13.2 points per game. He's shooting 44.4% from threes, though. That's super impressive. Definitely the best on the squad. And you're going to miss out on 25 minutes of play, something that Bashir has given every single night so far this season, except last night against Utah. So what does that mean for this one? Well, of course, David Castillo is probably going to jump right into the starting five. You don't get that type of juice off the bench. But as we saw last night, that didn't matter. Castillo was electric last night. He stepped up, shot 6 for 9 from the three-point land, better than 44%, better than Bashir has been so far this season. And if that is what he continues to do, then you probably won't miss him as much because Castillo will step up. Now, can Castillo give you 33 minutes every night? That'll be the big question, of course. But if he's shooting 6 for 9, if he's shooting 66% from three-point, I think you have to keep him in regardless. Having the fact that you don't have a fresh player in to rotate with Castillo, to rotate with Johnson and I would say Haggerty, but I don't think he's leaving the court anytime soon. He played 39 minutes in this game, played 40 in the last one. I think we're at the point in the season where PJ Haggerty is going to play every minute of these basketball games. It makes you wonder how much that will play a big deal in as we get farther and farther down the season when fatigue starts to really kick in. I think we're going to start seeing that over the next couple games. This is a short roster now because of the injury to Bashir and to a couple other injuries as well. Kamari McGriff was ruled out around shoot around. He said that was a game time decision. They ruled him out. We'll see if he's going to be ready to go for the game against Kansas. And they said it was the same thing for Elias Rapiak. So got to see if they're going to be ready to go. Make sure that they're ready to go their day-to-day. No timelines beyond that. And if those guys are ready to go against Kansas, then I really like our chances if this offense continues to do what they're doing. Because the offense was great in this game. The rebounding didn't lose by much. You lost 34-29 in the rebounding battle. You had 10 turnovers. That's not anything to really be catastrophic. Like it to be a little lower. Utah only had 9. But you're not losing the turnover battle very much. You're not giving a lot of possessions away. I'd like the rebounding to be a little better, but I'm not going to complain about it today because it was only a -5 in the rebounding category. And that's something that has not really been the case all season long. Turnover battle. Turnovers have been a struggle. There's been moments where they've had 13 turnovers in one half. They had 10 in the entire game in this one. So although you would, of course, like those numbers to be better, more rebounds, less turnovers, these ones aren't catastrophic in this basketball game, and that might be the reason why you snuck out with this victory. There's a lot of things that you got to worry about, though, moving forward. If Kamari McGriff, if Elias Rapiak are not ready, can Taj Manning continue to excel? He can give you the minutes, but he's not giving you that type of offensive production that Kamari McGriff has given you in the past. And that's something that they've really been able to focus and utilize over the last couple games, and it opens up the three-point shooting. It opens up PJ Haggerty being able to drive the lane a little bit more. It just gives you an extra option. And Taj Manning, although he's had a really good progression in his career from last year to this year, we've seen that for effort. We've seen that for defense. We haven't really seen it on the offensive side, especially in this past game where he only scored 2 points, but only shot 2 attempts as well. So, of course, those two will be very important to pay attention to. Look, I think you can get past the Abdi Bashir injury. As much as I'd like him out there, as much as I think he's a three-point specialist, and it's awesome when he gets those down, if David Castillo can do what he did in this game for the next 4 weeks, if he can be consistent and be that second shooter, if Nate Johnson can take that little step up, because I think we're still waiting on him to completely blossom. If that can happen, then I think you can get through the Abdi Bashir injury. I think hopefully these lingering injuries of McGriff and Rapiak, those figure themselves out because you need that rotational depth in the front court. So I think that's the most important. Although Jerome Tang's not rushing anybody back, he said no pressure, no rushing anyone back. I don't know if that's very true. I think there is a lot of pressure on this schedule. I think you have to get some wins, and I think you have to get a win against Kansas in Manhattan. We'll talk more about that next. Can that happen? And if it does, what does that mean for the rest of the season? Does that completely flip the way we think about this Wildcats roster the rest of the way? I think we should talk about that. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. The Kansas Jayhawks come to town, and that's going to be an interesting game on the 24th. It's on Fox. It's a national game, 7 o'clock Central Time in prime time. Kansas State taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. And Kansas Jayhawks haven't been the best team this year. They're not the blue blood of the past. They're not the sitting on the number 1 line, your national champion favorite, but they're still a pretty good basketball team. Don't get me wrong. They're 14-5. I think they're starting to figure it out. And most of their losses have come to top 25 opponents. Now, they've had some hiccups. They've had some hiccups on the road. They lost to West Virginia. They lost to UCF. UCF was ranked at one point, but not during that time. And the rest of the losses came on against ranked teams, some of the top teams in the country. Here's why I think it's possible that Kansas State can win against Kansas. Now, I'm not expecting it because, look, I think the game against Utah was close. Utah is at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the Big 12 right now, and I think that they just did just enough to get their first victory. Now, can they make that step forward? And, of course, they got to overcome, fatigue, injuries, all that good stuff. If they win this game, we think differently about this team, no doubt. But we'll see if that is the case. Here is how they can win this one. Well, first off, it's at home. I think that's important. If you look at the games that Kansas has lost this year, 4 of the 5 games, the only exception is the game against UConn, who was the 5th-ranked team in the country at the time. That was their only loss at Allen Fieldhouse. Every single one of the other losses, 4 of the 5 losses for Kansas, are either on the road or on a neutral site. There was one at MSG at Madison Square Garden. The rest were on the road. So, Kansas State, can they win this one in Manhattan? Can they do it on a national stage? I mean, I think that's possible. I think that's absolutely possible. Now, there is some things going on with head coach Bill Self. He did not coach in the game last night for Colorado. He had a medical, I think it was like a medical incident, if you will. He just didn't travel with the team. He has reported that he's feeling much better. They had their assistant coach, Vaughn, coach Kansas beating Colorado last night when we were taking care of Utah. I expect Bill Self, the coach in Manhattan. Of course, we want him to feel better. Rivalries are one thing, but health and everything is way more important than it comes to college athletics and comes to rivalries. So hopefully everything works good on Bill Self's side. I'd like to see him on the court and coaching that game. But that's something to pay attention to. Obviously, one thing, but it didn't matter against Colorado. They took care of business 75-69 last night. Here's one more thing that I got to put into the context. And I don't know if this is fair. And if you're a Jayhawks fan, you're listening to this, you might think this is laughable, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you look at the schedule after Kansas State, a lot of people think Kansas State are a bad basketball team. And look, I'm not saying they're fantastic. I'm not saying they're world beaters. Right now, we're talking about potentially making the bubble for the NCAA tournament. So I'm nowhere near that conversation. But if you look at their schedule after Kansas State, you got BYU and Texas Tech right after. 2 top 25 teams. Then you have Utah. And then you have Arizona and Iowa State. 4 of your 5 games right after Kansas State are against top 15 opponents. The 4 best teams in the Big 12. Could they look ahead? Is that something that you can count on? Absolutely not. But I think that's safe to think about. I think that's one thing at least to put in consideration. Obviously, it's a completely different story because it's rivalry, Kansas State and Kansas, and I'm sure Kansas would love to blow the brakes off Kansas State because of what happened last year. They split the series. Kansas State's feeling very good right now. They got their first Big 12 win of the season. PJ Haggerty is going to get his first taste of this rivalry. I think this is a great opportunity for Kansas State to maybe steal one. And if they steal one here, then we're talking a different rest of the way for Kansas State. And that's wild to say that we can say that at 2-5 in the conference. But hear me out. If you steal this one against Kansas, the momentum continues. The trend continues for Kansas State. The peaks and valleys continue. Then you got West Virginia, a team that beat Kansas already. If you steal that one, then you got Iowa State at home. And we all know what happened last year in that Iowa State game in Ames. you stole that one. If you can start a little run in that Kansas game, then you're talking about potentially getting back to 500 with an Iowa State victory. It is completely possible. I'm not holding my breath by any means, folks, but we all know what happened last year with the peaks and valleys of the Big 12 Conference. Who's to say that won't happen again? You get a big win against Kansas, a top 25 team currently ranked 19th in the country, and you continue that trend all the way through to Manhattan yet again on February 1st against Iowa State, a team that hasn't had the best last couple of weeks either. They were sitting number 2 in the country. They're now down to 9. They've got some bad losses on their record. Could they do that? Maybe. We'll see what happens. We'll have more about this in the coming days. Of course, we got some college football to talk about as well. We got a schedule release to talk about. We'll have all that stuff right here on Locked On Kansas State very soon. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. I appreciate you making it your first listen of the day. And we'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.